Hi everyone. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin.
My name is Remy.
The conversation I overheard between my wife and her best friend on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday afternoon exposed months of deception, a secret affair, and the devastating realization that the woman I had married less than a year earlier had been living an entirely different life than the one I thought we were building together. Daniela and I had been married for only 2 months, still in what most people would consider the honeymoon phase of our relationship, though I had begun to notice subtle changes in her behavior that suggested the initial excitement of newlywed life was giving way to the more complex realities of building a life together. We were both established enough in our careers to feel ready for marriage, but still young enough to be figuring out how to balance individual needs with partnership responsibilities. I had been working longer hours than usual during those early months of marriage, partly because I was trying to establish myself in a new position at the firm I work for, and partly because I wanted to build the kind of financial security that would allow Daniela and me to buy a house, start a family, and create the stable life we had talked about during our engagement. The demands of proving myself in a competitive industry meant that I was often at the office until 8 or 9 in the evening, and occasionally worked weekends when project deadlines required extra attention. Daniela worked for a small marketing agency, a job that gave her more flexibility and regular hours than my position provided. She had been supportive of my career ambitions and understood that my current schedule was temporary, necessary for establishing the professional reputation and financial foundation that would benefit both of us in the long term. But over the past month, I had begun to notice that Daniela seemed increasingly distant and emotionally unavailable in ways that went beyond normal adjustments to married life. She had been less physically affectionate, often claiming to be tired or stressed when I would try to initiate intimacy. Our conversations had become more superficial and routine, focused on practical matters rather than the deeper emotional connection that had characterized our relationship during our courtship and early marriage. Daniela had also been complaining more frequently about not feeling well, describing symptoms like fatigue, nausea, and general malaise that she attributed to stress from work and adjustments to our new lifestyle. When I would suggest that she see a doctor about these persistent health issues, Daniela would dismiss my concerns and insist that she just needed more rest and time to adjust to our new routines. I had assumed that Daniela's distance and health complaints were normal responses to the transitions and pressures that many couples experience during their first year of marriage. I told myself that with time and once I was more established in my new job and could spend more time at home, Daniela's mood and energy would improve, and we would rediscover the intimacy and connection that had brought us together. On the Tuesday morning that would change everything, Daniela told me that she had finally made a doctor's appointment to address the health issues she had been experiencing for the past several weeks. She didn't give any more explanation, but I was pleased that Daniela was finally taking her health concerns seriously and encouraged her to be thorough about describing her symptoms to the doctor. I offered to take time off work to accompany her to the appointment, but Daniela insisted that it wasn't necessary and that she preferred to handle the visit independently. Around 11:30 that morning, while I was in meetings at the office, I received a text message from Daniela explaining that she had returned from the doctor but was feeling worse than before and needed to rest. She told me not to worry about her and to stay focused on work, assuring me that she would be fine with some sleep and rest. But Daniela's message made me more concerned rather than less worried about her condition. The idea that a doctor's visit had made her feel worse didn't sit well with me. During my lunch break, I decided to stop by our apartment to check on Daniela and perhaps surprise her with her favorite soup from the restaurant near her office, thinking that a thoughtful gesture and some quality time together might help her feel better both physically and emotionally. I purchased Daniela's favorite chicken and vegetable soup and drove to our apartment, planning to spend my lunch hour making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. I was looking forward to the opportunity to show Daniela that her well-being was more important to me than any work obligations. When I arrived at our apartment building, I was mildly surprised to find that our front door was unlocked, since Daniela was usually careful about security when she was home alone during the day. I assumed that she had forgotten to lock the door due to feeling unwell, and I quietly let myself into the apartment, not wanting to disturb her if she was sleeping. As I stepped inside, I heard low voices coming from our living room and realized that Daniela was awake and apparently talking with someone. My first assumption was that she was on a phone call, possibly with her mother or a friend who was checking on her health, so I paused in the entryway to avoid interrupting her conversation. But as I listened more carefully, I recognized the voice of Daniela's best friend, who had apparently come over to check on Daniela after her doctor's visit. I decided to wait a bit before announcing my presence, not wanting to interrupt their girls' talk. What I overheard during those few minutes of eavesdropping would completely destroy my understanding of my marriage and reveal deceptions that went far beyond anything I could have imagined. My wife, Daniela, and her best friend were discussing the real reason for Daniela's visit, and the conversation made it clear that Daniela had been lying to me about virtually every aspect of her recent behavior and health issues. Daniela was telling her best friend about the abortion procedure she had undergone that morning, explaining that she had been pregnant for approximately 8 weeks but had decided to terminate the pregnancy because she was convinced that the baby wasn't mine. According to Daniela's conversation with Carmen, the timeline of her pregnancy didn't align with our intimate relationship, and she was certain that if she had continued the pregnancy, I would have eventually discovered that I wasn't the biological father. My wife's best friend was reassuring her that she had made the right choice by keeping the pregnancy and abortion secret from me, arguing that revealing the truth would only hurt everyone involved without serving any constructive purpose. She praised Daniela for handling a difficult situation discreetly and protecting me from knowledge that would have been devastating and destructive to our marriage. As I stood frozen in our entryway, listening to my wife describe terminating a pregnancy that she was certain resulted from an affair, I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. The woman I had married, the person I had committed my life to just 2 months earlier, had a secret relationship with another man and had chosen to end a pregnancy rather than face the consequences of her infidelity. Daniela's conversation with her best friend revealed not just the fact of her affair and abortion, but also the calculated ways she had been deceiving me about her recent behavior and health issues. Her claims of feeling sick hadn't been mysterious health problems. They had been pregnancy symptoms that she couldn't explain without revealing her affair. Her emotional distance hadn't been adjustment difficulties. It had been guilt and stress about maintaining her deception while carrying another man's child. The casual tone of Daniela's conversation with her best friend was almost as shocking as the content of what she was saying. Daniela wasn't expressing anguish or regret about her affair or the pregnancy. She was discussing the abortion as a practical solution to a problem that could have exposed her infidelity and destroyed our marriage. She seemed more concerned about successfully concealing her deception than about the ethical implications of what she had done. After a while of listening to Daniela and her friend discuss the details of the abortion and strategies for maintaining the secrecy of Daniela's affair, I quietly left our apartment and sat in my car outside our building, trying to process what I had just learned about my wife and our marriage. The shock of Daniela's revelations was so complete that I had difficulty thinking clearly about what the information meant or how I should respond to discoveries that had fundamentally changed my understanding of everything I thought I knew about our relationship. The woman I had dated and married had been living a completely different life from the one I was aware of, conducting an affair while maintaining the appearance of a committed partner. I found myself replaying the past several years of our relationship and marriage, now understanding Daniela's behavior in a completely different context. The timing of Daniela's affair was particularly disturbing because it meant that she had been involved with another man either during our engagement or in the week of our wedding, periods when I had believed we were most committed to each other and most focused on building our future together. Daniela had been betraying our relationship during what should have been the most secure and trusting time in our partnership. I tried to understand how someone could maintain such extensive deception while living in daily intimacy with the person they were betraying. Daniela had been sharing a bed with me, planning our future together, and accepting my love and support while secretly carrying another man's child and planning to terminate the pregnancy to conceal her infidelity. When I finally returned to work that afternoon, I was unable to concentrate on any tasks or responsibilities, my mind consumed with questions about who Daniela had been involved with, how long the affair had lasted, and what other aspects of our marriage might be built on lies and deception that I hadn't yet discovered. That evening, I returned home to find Daniela resting in bed, still claiming to be recovering from her doctor's visit and the health issues that had been troubling her. She appeared genuinely unwell, which I now understood was probably due to the physical and emotional stress of the abortion procedure rather than any mysterious medical condition. Instead of immediately confronting Daniela with what I had overheard, I decided to approach the situation more carefully, giving her opportunities to be honest with me before revealing that I knew about her deception. I asked Daniela how she was feeling and whether the doctor had provided any useful information about her health concerns. Daniela repeated her previous explanations about feeling unwell and needing rest, maintaining the fiction that her symptoms were related to stress and fatigue rather than pregnancy and abortion. When I pressed her more specifically about what the doctor had said, Daniela became evasive and claimed that the visit hadn't been particularly informative. Finally, I asked Daniela directly whether she had been pregnant, watching her face carefully for signs of how she would respond to a question that should have been shocking if she had nothing to hide. Daniela's immediate reaction was defensive denial, but when I continued to press for honest answers, she eventually admitted that she had been pregnant but had miscarried early in the pregnancy. Daniela's willingness to lie even when directly confronted about her pregnancy confirmed that she had no intention of being honest about what had actually happened, and that she was prepared to maintain elaborate deceptions rather than face the consequences of her affair and abortion. She was treating me like someone who couldn't handle the truth, rather than like a partner who deserved honesty about matters that affected our marriage. When I made it clear that I knew Daniela was lying about having a miscarriage, she finally admitted that she had chosen to terminate the pregnancy, but she tried to justify her decision by claiming that she hadn't been certain I was the father and that she had been trying to protect me from uncertainty and pain. But Daniela's explanations only raised more questions about the extent of her deception and the nature of her affair. If she hadn't been certain about paternity, it meant that she had been involved with another man during a period when she was also intimate with me. If she had been so concerned about protecting me from pain, why had she chosen to have an affair in the first place? I asked Daniela directly who the father might have been, when the affair had occurred, and why she had chosen to marry me if she was involved with someone else. Daniela became increasingly defensive and emotional as my questions forced her to acknowledge the scope of her betrayal and the elaborate nature of her deceptions. I would later find out that Daniela had been attracted to a long-time male friend, someone she had known for years but had never dated because he had been in other relationships during the periods when they were both single. Shortly before our wedding, this friend had become available, and Daniela had spent a night with him that she characterized as a momentary lapse in judgment rather than the beginning of an ongoing affair. According to Daniela, her involvement with this friend had been a single encounter that occurred during the stress and uncertainty of our wedding planning, and she had convinced herself that the pregnancy couldn't be his because they had only been together once. But the timing of her pregnancy suggested otherwise, and Daniela had ultimately decided that the risk of carrying a child who might not be mine was too great to justify continuing the pregnancy. Learning that Daniela's affair had occurred so close to our wedding, during a time when we were supposedly most committed to each other and most focused on our future together, was devastating in ways that I hadn't anticipated. Daniela had betrayed our relationship during the very period when we were making our most serious commitments to each other, suggesting that her participation in our marriage had been ambivalent from the very beginning. The revelation that Daniela had been attracted to this friend for years and had acted on that attraction as soon as he became available also suggested that her commitment to our marriage had always been conditional, dependent on not having access to someone she found more desirable. I had apparently been Daniela's acceptable choice rather than her preferred choice, and she had been willing to risk our marriage for an opportunity to explore her feelings for someone else. Over the following days, I found myself unable to sleep or concentrate on work, consumed with questions about what Daniela's betrayal meant for our marriage and whether there was any possibility of rebuilding trust after such extensive deception. Daniela had lied about her health, her pregnancy, her abortion and her affair, maintaining elaborate fictions while accepting my love, support, and commitment under completely false pretenses. Daniela seemed to believe that her confession and expressions of regret would be sufficient to repair the damage she had caused, and she began making efforts to be more affectionate and attentive, apparently hoping that renewed romantic effort could compensate for months of deception and betrayal. But her attempts at reconciliation felt manipulative rather than genuine, more focused on avoiding the consequences of her actions than on addressing the fundamental problems they had revealed. I began emotionally distancing myself from Daniela while I processed the full implications of what I had discovered and decided how to respond to revelations that had completely destroyed my trust in her character and commitment. Daniela noticed my withdrawal but seemed to interpret it as temporary upset rather than recognition that our marriage had been fundamentally compromised. During this period of emotional detachment, I learned additional details about Daniela's affair that made her betrayal even more devastating. The friend she had been involved with was someone I knew socially, someone who had attended our wedding and had been friendly to me while secretly knowing that he had been intimate with my wife just weeks before our marriage. The discovery that Daniela's affair partner was someone from our shared social circle meant that other people might be aware of Daniela's infidelity and my humiliation, and that our marriage had been compromised not just privately but potentially publicly. After several days of processing Daniela's betrayal and considering my options, I made the decision to end our marriage rather than attempt to rebuild trust that had been so completely destroyed. Daniela's willingness to conduct an affair, terminate a pregnancy to conceal her infidelity, and lie extensively about her actions revealed character traits that made me doubt whether she was capable of the honesty and commitment that marriage requires. I confided in my older brother about Daniela's affair and abortion, needing to discuss the situation with someone I trusted before making final decisions about how to proceed. My brother was shocked by Daniela's deception but supportive of whatever decision I made about our marriage, understanding that some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome through forgiveness and renewed effort. Before the end of that week, I contacted a family law attorney and began the process of filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences rather than Daniela's specific acts of infidelity and deception. I had no interest in creating a contentious legal battle or publicly exposing the details of Daniela's affair, but I also had no interest in continuing a marriage that had been built on lies from its very beginning. Daniela's reaction to my decision to seek divorce was shock and desperate attempts to convince me that our marriage was worth saving despite her betrayal. She promised to be completely honest going forward, to end any contact with her affair partner, and to do whatever was necessary to rebuild trust between us. But Daniela's promises felt empty given the scope and duration of her deception, and her focus on avoiding the consequences of her actions rather than accepting responsibility for them suggested that she still didn't understand the fundamental damage she had caused to our relationship. Someone who could maintain such elaborate lies while accepting love and commitment under false pretenses wasn't someone I could trust with my future. I moved out of our shared apartment and began the process of rebuilding my life independently, understanding that the marriage I thought I had been building had never actually existed. Daniela had been performing the role of a committed wife while secretly maintaining other loyalties and interests that were incompatible with genuine partnership. The divorce proceedings were completed within 6 months, as Daniela and I had limited shared assets and no children to complicate the legal dissolution of our marriage. Daniela made periodic attempts to reconcile throughout the process, but I maintained firm boundaries about communication and refused to be drawn back into a relationship that had proven to be fundamentally dishonest. The experience taught me important lessons about the importance of recognizing the difference between temporary difficulties and fundamental character problems. Daniela's emotional distance and health complaints had been symptoms of deeper issues that I should have investigated more thoroughly, rather than assuming they would resolve themselves over time. I learned that some betrayals reveal such fundamental incompatibilities in values and character that they cannot be overcome through forgiveness and renewed effort. Daniela's willingness to conduct an affair, terminate a pregnancy to conceal her infidelity, and lie extensively about her actions showed that she approached relationships with a level of deception and self-interest that made genuine partnership impossible. Most importantly, I discovered that protecting my own emotional and physical health sometimes requires walking away from people and situations that consistently cause harm, even when those people express regret and promise to change. Daniela's betrayal had been too complete and too calculated to be dismissed as a momentary mistake, and her continued focus on avoiding consequences rather than accepting responsibility suggested that she hadn't learned the lessons necessary for genuine change. The months following my divorce allowed me to gain perspective on warning signs I had missed during my relationship with Daniela, and to understand how my desire to be a supportive and trusting partner had sometimes prevented me from acknowledging obvious problems. Daniela's pregnancy symptoms, emotional distance, and general unavailability had been clear indicators that something significant was affecting her behavior, but I had accepted her explanations rather than investigating further. I also recognized that my focus on building financial security and professional success had sometimes meant that I was emotionally unavailable to Daniela during a period when she was facing temptation and making choices that would destroy our marriage. While Daniela's affair was her responsibility rather than mine, I learned the importance of maintaining emotional connection and open communication even during stressful periods of career development. Looking back on the conversation I overheard between Daniela and her friend, I realized that discovering the truth about Daniela's affair and abortion was actually a blessing that saved me from continuing to invest in someone who would have created ongoing problems throughout our marriage. Daniela's deception had been extensive and calculating, suggesting that she was capable of maintaining elaborate lies for extended periods when it served her interests. The woman who had terminated a pregnancy to conceal her infidelity while accepting my love and support under false pretenses had revealed character traits that would have created ongoing trust and intimacy problems, even if I had never discovered her specific acts of betrayal. Daniela's approach to handling difficult situations through deception rather than honest communication would have damaged our relationship in numerous ways over time. The abortion that Daniela had undergone to protect her secret had ultimately exposed a much larger pattern of dishonesty and self-interest that made me understand our marriage had never been the genuine partnership I had believed it to be. Daniela's willingness to terminate a pregnancy rather than face the consequences of her affair showed that she prioritized her own comfort and reputation over honesty and an authentic relationship. The friend who had been willing to sleep with Daniela shortly before her wedding to another man had also revealed character traits that made me glad to discover his true nature before our social relationship continued. Someone who could betray a friend's trust so casually wasn't someone whose friendship had any value or authenticity. Daniela's best friend, who had encouraged Daniela to maintain her deception rather than being honest about her affair and abortion, had also shown that she prioritized Daniela's immediate comfort over the health and authenticity of Daniela's marriage. The support system that had enabled Daniela's betrayal was as problematic as the betrayal itself. The conversation I overheard that day had initially felt like the most devastating moment of my adult life, but it ultimately became the foundation for building a much happier and more authentic future. Daniela's deception had ended one chapter of my life, but it had also made possible a much healthier chapter. Sometimes the most painful discoveries are also the most necessary, because they force us to stop accepting relationships that don't honor our worth and to hold out for partnerships that are built on genuine compatibility rather than convenience and deception. Daniela's betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also shown me that I deserved better than what she had been able to offer. Thank you for watching.